Have you ever imagined being trapped behind four walls for years, knowing your mother is dying outside, and you can't say goodbye? Today, I'm sharing with you the story of Angela Mercer, a woman who did the unthinkable to see her mother one last time. Behind the jail, the inmate walked out the front door, dressed as a nun, and no one suspected a thing. This isn't a story of fantasy or supernatural powers. It's a raw, real narrative about an ordinary woman who used nothing but her intelligence and observation skills to accomplish the impossible, and the consequences that followed. How does someone become so invisible they can escape from a medium-security prison? What drives a person to risk additional years of sentencing for just a few moments of freedom? And most importantly, what happens when she has to face the consequences of her choices? Over the next 10 chapters, we'll dive into a story about loss, redemption, and the search for an authentic life, even when surrounded by concrete walls. If you're interested in real stories that explore the depth of human experience, make sure to subscribe to this channel right now. Hit the like button so more people can discover this series, and share in the comments whether you think Angela's choices were justified. Her mother was dying. Would you have done the same? Now, let's begin our journey with Angela Mercer, the inmate who fooled everyone and walked to freedom through the front door. Angela Mercer had been at Lakewood Correctional Facility for 3 years, 7 months, and 12 days. Not that she was counting. Time behind bars stretched like taffy, sometimes compressed into nothing, other times pulled endlessly until it lost all meaning. The concrete walls, steel bars, and constant surveillance had become her reality. But Angela had discovered something valuable. In prison, being forgettable was power. The guard's eyes slid past her unremarkable features: brown hair cut prison short, average height, thin from institutional food. She'd cultivated this invisibility carefully, speaking softly, avoiding conflicts, becoming background noise in a place where attention meant trouble. "Mercer, you've got kitchen duty," Officer Ramirez called, barely glancing at her as she passed Angela's cell. Angela nodded silently, slipping into the hallway flow of inmates headed to work assignments. The kitchen smelled of industrial cleaner and today's lunch, some unidentifiable stew. Angela took her position at the serving line, mechanically ladling portions onto plastic trays. Through the steam, she watched Sister Catherine and 2 other nuns from the local convent setting up for their weekly outreach program in the adjacent multi-purpose room. The Sisters of Mercy had been coming to Lakewood for nearly a decade, offering spiritual guidance, literacy classes, and simply someone who would listen without judgment. Angela had never attended their sessions. Religion wasn't her thing, but she'd observed them carefully over the past year. Sister Catherine caught her eye and smiled warmly. Angela nodded back, her expression carefully neutral while her mind worked. The older nuns' kind eyes held no suspicion, no awareness that Angela was memorizing every detail of their habits. Not the religious practices, but the actual black and white garments that concealed almost everything except their faces. "Hey, dreamer," hissed Tanya from the next station. "You're flooding the trays." Angela blinked, refocusing on her ladle, now overflowing into the compartments. She muttered an apology and returned to her task, but her thoughts remained elsewhere. In 3 days, the prison would host its annual community outreach event, when various religious and social organizations would come for a day of programming. The sisters would bring additional volunteers. Security would be focused on the visitors, not on one unremarkable inmate. That evening, in her cell, Angela withdrew a small notebook from beneath her thin mattress. Inside were detailed observations, timing notes, and small pencil sketches of the facility's routines. 3 years of patient watching and waiting, of becoming so ordinary that even the most vigilant guards no longer truly saw her. She'd been deemed dangerous once, armed robbery gone wrong, a security guard shot, though not by her, and a reputation built on her ruthless planning rather than violent tendencies. But here she'd erased that person, becoming instead a model prisoner with a spotless record and early release potentially on the horizon. Yet Angela couldn't wait. Not after what she'd learned 2 months ago in a brief, devastating letter. Her mother was dying. Cancer. 6 months at most. The only person who had ever believed in Angela's potential rather than her mistakes wouldn't live to see her walk out of Lakewood legally. Unless Angela rewrote the rules of her release. She closed the notebook, tucking it away before lights out. In the darkness of her cell, Angela stared at the ceiling, mentally rehearsing each step of what would happen in 3 days. Success meant freedom. Failure meant an extended sentence and permanent maximum security. Worth it, she whispered to herself. So quietly the words barely existed outside her mind. For once, Angela Mercer would not be invisible. The morning of the community outreach event dawned with a clarity that seemed almost suspicious to Angela. As if the universe itself was watching, she thought, tying her regulation shoes with steady hands, despite the adrenaline already trickling into her system. Sister Catherine and 5 other nuns arrived shortly after breakfast, their black and white habits standing out starkly against the drab institutional colors of Lakewood. Angela observed them from the periphery of the recreation yard, noting the 2 unfamiliar faces, volunteers, just as she'd anticipated. "Mercer," called Officer Wilson. "You're on setup duty in the chapel. Move it." This was unexpected, not part of her plan, but Angela adapted instantly. "Yes, sir," she responded, following him inside without protest. Perhaps this was even better. The chapel was adjacent to the administrative wing where the nuns would store their personal items. The chapel was Lakewood's attempt at ecumenism, a bland room with movable chairs and interchangeable religious symbols that could be swapped depending on the service. Angela began arranging chairs in rows, positioning herself to keep the storage room door in her line of sight. Sister Catherine entered, followed by a younger nun carrying a box of pamphlets. "Good morning," Sister Catherine smiled. "Angela, isn't it?" Angela froze momentarily. She hadn't expected the nun to know her name. "Yes, sister," she replied cautiously. "I've noticed you watching our sessions," the older woman said kindly. "You've never joined us, though." Angela arranged her features into an expression of shy interest. "I've been thinking about it. My mother was religious." "Was?" Sister Catherine's eyes softened with practiced compassion. "She's very ill," Angela said, injecting just enough genuine emotion to make her voice waver. This wasn't part of the plan, engaging directly with Sister Catherine, but instinct told her to continue. "The doctors say she doesn't have long." The truth made the best cover, Angela knew. The pain in her eyes was real, and Sister Catherine responded to it instantly. "I'm so sorry, my dear. Is there anything we can do?" Angela shook her head. "She's in St. Mary's Hospice in Columbus. I haven't seen her in years. By the time I'm released..." She let the sentence hang unfinished. Sister Catherine touched her arm gently. "We visit St. Mary's regularly. I could bring her a message from you, perhaps?" "You would do that?" Angela looked up, allowing genuine surprise to show. Of course. Everyone deserves compassion, especially in their final days. Write your message and I'll make sure she receives it. For a moment, Angela's resolve wavered. Sister Catherine's kindness was not part of the equation, an unexpected variable in her carefully calculated plan. The nun truly wanted to help. with no idea she was speaking to a woman who intended to exploit the very compassion she offered. "Thank you," Angela said finally. "That means more than you know." As Sister Catherine moved away to organize her materials, Angela continued arranging chairs, her mind racing to incorporate this new development. The nun's kindness didn't change anything, couldn't change anything. Her mother was dying, and Angela had made her decision. 3 hours later, during the height of the outreach activities when the recreation hall was filled with inmates and visitors, Angela slipped away to use the restroom, a movement so ordinary no one marked her departure. Instead of returning, she made her way through a service corridor that was momentarily unmonitored due to a guard rotation she'd memorized months ago. In the administrative wing, she found what she was looking for: a small room where visitors stored their coats and personal items. The nuns' spare habits, brought for a ceremonial demonstration, hung neatly on a rack. Angela moved quickly, stripping off her prison uniform and pulling the heavy black and white garments over her head, arranging the complicated headpiece with practiced movements she'd rehearsed mentally countless times. The face looking back at her from a small mirror on the wall was transformed, framed in white, only her features visible, now solemn and composed in an expression she'd studied on the nuns for months. She tucked her prison clothes into a cleaning cart, took a deep breath, and stepped into the hallway. Walking with measured steps, eyes downcast in what she hoped appeared as pious reflection, Angela moved toward the administrative exit. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but her exterior remained calm, her movements unhurried. She passed Officer Garcia, who nodded respectfully without really seeing her. "Good afternoon, sister," he said automatically, barely glancing up from his clipboard. "Peace be with you," Angela murmured, using the phrase she'd heard the nun say countless times, her voice pitched slightly lower than normal. And then she was at the final checkpoint, presenting the visitor's badge she'd taken from the spare habits pocket. The guard scanned it, nodded, and buzzed the door open. Just like that, Angela Mercer walked out the front door of Lakewood Correctional Facility, dressed as a nun. And no one suspected a thing. The bus station in Carson City seemed impossibly loud to Angela after years of regulated prison noise. Conversations blended with announcements, the hiss of air brakes, and the constant hum of vending machines. She sat rigidly on a plastic bench, still wearing the nun's habit, though she'd removed the complicated headpiece and replaced it with a simple black scarf that covered her hair. She clutched a ticket to Columbus, purchased with money she'd painstakingly accumulated through extra work shifts in prison, and tried to appear as though bus stations and public freedom were normal parts of her existence. Inside, she was reeling. The escape had worked. She'd walked straight to a bus stop 3 blocks from the prison, where she'd caught a local bus into the city center. No alarms had sounded, no police cars had screeched around corners. Either they hadn't discovered her absence yet during the busy event, or they were keeping it quiet while they searched. Either way, she had perhaps a few hours head start before her face would be circulated to transportation hubs. Angela needed to change her appearance and continue moving. "Sister?" Angela startled, looking up to see an elderly woman smiling hesitantly at her. "I hope I'm not bothering you," the woman continued, "but I wanted to thank you and your order for the work you do. My sister was in hospice care with the Sisters of Mercy last year. Such comfort you brought her." Angela's throat tightened. She hadn't anticipated this. Being approached, engaged with, as though she truly was a nun. The heavy fabric of the habit suddenly felt like a lead weight. "You're very kind," she managed, pitching her voice to match the soft tones she'd studied. "I'm glad we could provide comfort. Are you traveling far?" the woman asked, settling beside her uninvited. "Columbus," Angela answered, calculating that vague truthfulness would be easier to maintain than elaborate lies. Family matters. Oh, I'm headed to Cincinnati myself, visiting my grandchildren. The woman opened her purse, revealing a wallet full of photos she was clearly eager to share. Angela nodded through 10 minutes of grandchild anecdotes, her anxiety mounting with each passing moment. When the woman's bus was finally announced, Angela accepted a handshake that turned into an unexpected hug. "God bless you, sister," the woman said warmly before departing. Alone again, Angela felt a curious mixture of relief and shame. The interaction had been her first as a free woman, and it had been built entirely on deception. The genuine gratitude in the woman's eyes haunted her. Angela reminded herself that she had bigger concerns than moral qualms, like avoiding arrest and reaching her mother before it was too late. When her own bus was called, Angela boarded and took a seat near the back, away from the other passengers. As the vehicle pulled away from the station, she allowed herself a moment of triumph. Phase 1 complete. Now she needed to find somewhere to change clothes or alter her appearance, and continue to Columbus without the conspicuous religious garb. The bus made a rest stop in a small town about an hour later. Angela slipped into the station's bathroom with the small backpack she'd assembled from items in the visitor's room. Inside was a plain t-shirt, jeans, and a baseball cap, all borrowed without permission from the lost and found. In a bathroom stall, she changed quickly, stuffing the habit into a garbage can beneath paper towels. She wet her short hair and slicked it back, pulled the cap low over her eyes, and exited the bathroom, looking like a completely different person than the nun who had entered. Back on the bus, Angela took a different seat. No one gave her a second glance. She was again becoming invisible, but this time by choice. The skill that had been her survival strategy in prison was now her greatest asset in freedom. As the landscape rolled by outside the window, Angela allowed herself to think about her mother for the first time since executing her escape. Carol Mercer had been a kindergarten teacher, patient, kind, and perpetually disappointed in her daughter's choices. Yet she had visited Angela monthly during the first year of her incarceration, becoming less frequent only when her health began to fail. Their last visit had been 6 months ago. Her mother had seemed tired, but had said nothing about illness. The letter revealing her cancer diagnosis had come like a thunderbolt from a clear sky. Terminal, advanced. So little time left. Angela pressed her forehead against the cool glass of the bus window. What would her mother say about this escape? She'd be horrified, certainly. Carol Mercer had always believed in facing consequences, in rebuilding one's life honestly. She'd encouraged Angela to use her prison time for education, for reflection, for change. Instead, Angela had used it to perfect an escape plan, to become a fugitive, to throw away any chance of a legitimate second chance. "For you, Mom," she whispered to her reflection in the window. "I'm coming to say goodbye." But as the bus continued eastward toward Columbus, Angela couldn't quiet the voice inside that questioned whether this impulsive, desperate act was truly for her dying mother, or if it was just another selfish choice in a lifetime of them. St. Mary's Hospice occupied a renovated Victorian mansion on the outskirts of Columbus, its brick facade softened by climbing ivy and window boxes filled with autumn flowers. Angela stood across the street, watching visitors come and go through the main entrance. Each carried something: flowers, books, food containers. She had nothing to offer except her presence, and that was tainted by her status as an escaped convict. For the first time since walking out of Lakewood, Angela questioned her plan. What exactly did she hope to accomplish here? See her mother one last time, certainly. But then what? She couldn't stay. couldn't reveal herself to the authorities, couldn't attend a funeral when the time came. She'd traded a prison sentence that would have eventually ended for a lifetime of looking over her shoulder. Too late for second thoughts, Angela muttered to herself, adjusting the second-hand jacket she'd purchased at a thrift store with her dwindling funds. She crossed the street with determined steps. The reception area was warm and deliberately non-institutional. Comfortable couches, soft lighting, and the absence of the antiseptic smell Angela associated with hospitals. A middle-aged woman looked up from the reception desk with a practiced smile. "May I help you?" Angela had prepared for this. "I'm here to see Carol Mercer. I'm a former student of hers." The partial truth again. Angela had briefly attended the elementary school where her mother taught, before her parents' divorce sent them to different school districts. The receptionist's face softened. "Mrs. Mercer has had quite a few visitors from her teaching days. She'll be pleased to see you. Your name?" "Beth," Angela said, using her middle name. "Beth Johnson." "Sign here, please. Room 217, up the stairs and to the right. Just so you know, she's having a good day today, but she tires easily." Angela's hand trembled slightly as she signed the visitor log. The receptionist didn't notice, already reaching for a ringing phone. Angela followed the directions upstairs, her pulse quickening with each step. Room 217's door stood partially open. Angela paused outside, suddenly breathless with anxiety. What if her mother didn't recognize her? What if she called for help? What if she rejected Angela's presence entirely? Before she could retreat, a nurse emerged from the room, nodding politely as she passed. Angela had no choice now but to enter or look suspicious. She pushed the door open gently. The room was unexpectedly bright, with large windows overlooking a garden. Medical equipment was present but discreet, and there, propped up in a bed surrounded by photographs, cards, and a vase of yellow daisies, was Carol Mercer. Angela barely recognized her. The vibrant, sturdy woman of her memory had been replaced by a thin figure with hollowed cheeks and hair gone completely silver. But her eyes, when they turned toward the door, were the same clear blue that had always seen straight through Angela's defenses. Those eyes widened now in shock and disbelief. "Angie," her mother whispered, using the childhood nickname Angela hadn't heard in years. "Is that really you?" Angela moved to the bedside, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. She nodded, taking her mother's fragile hand between her own. "How are you here?" Carol asked, her voice stronger now. "Did they grant you compassionate release? Why didn't anyone tell me?" The moment of truth. Angela could lie, claim an official release her mother would never live to see disproven, or she could tell the truth and risk her mother's final days being shadowed by knowledge of her daughter's crime. "I had to see you," Angela said finally. "When I got your letter, Mom, why didn't you tell me sooner?" Carol's eyes filled with tears. "I didn't want you to worry when there was nothing you could do. I thought we had more time for you to finish your sentence properly." She squeezed Angela's hand with surprising strength. "But you didn't answer my question. How are you here?" Angela looked down at their joined hands. "I left," she said simply, "without permission." The silence that followed felt endless. When Angela finally looked up, she expected disappointment or anger in her mother's expression. Instead, she found complex emotion, concern, sadness, and something that might have been understanding. "Oh, Angie," Carol sighed, "what have you done?" "What I had to," Angela replied, her voice steadier now. "They wouldn't have let me see you, not in time." Her mother closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, determination had replaced the shock. "How long until they find you?" I don't know. I've been careful. Changed my appearance, used cash only, but eventually ... Angela shrugged. It's just a matter of time. Carol nodded slowly. Then we shouldn't waste what we have. She shifted slightly in her bed, making room beside her. Tell me everything, what you've been learning, what you're planning. Before you left, were you at least on a better path? Angela perched carefully on the edge of the bed and began to talk. She spoke of the GED she'd earned in prison, the computer skills class she'd excelled in, the books she'd devoured in the prison library. She described her plan to find work in data entry once released. A quiet job where her record might matter less than her skills. She didn't mention her methodical observation of the nuns, her calculated exploitation of their kindness, or the fear that had driven her to abandon the legitimate second chance she'd been slowly building. Carol listened intently, asking questions, offering suggestions, her teacher's mind still sharp despite her failing body. For those hours, the room in St. Mary's Hospice became a sanctuary outside of time, where Angela wasn't a fugitive but simply a daughter reconnecting with her mother. When Carol finally drifted to sleep, exhausted by the emotional day, Angela sat watching the gentle rise and fall of her chest. The visit had been everything she'd hoped for and nothing she'd expected. She'd come seeking forgiveness, perhaps, or at least closure. Instead, she'd found her mother still investing in her future, a future that now seemed more precarious than ever. Angela stood quietly, careful not to wake her. She leaned down to kiss Carol's forehead, inhaling the familiar scent of her mother's lavender lotion beneath the medical smells. "I'll come back tomorrow," she whispered, though she wasn't certain it was a promise she could keep. As Angela slipped out of the room, she nearly collided with a figure in black and white, a nun carrying a small bouquet of flowers. Angela's heart seized in her chest as she recognized Sister Catherine from Lakewood. The nun's eyes widened in recognition, her mouth opening in surprise. In that moment, Angela realized that her carefully constructed escape plan had just collapsed entirely. Sister Catherine's expression shifted from shock to something more complex as she took in Angela's appearance. For a long, tense moment, the two women stood frozen in the hospice hallway. "Sister," Angela finally managed, her voice barely audible. "Angela Mercer," Sister Catherine replied evenly. "I think we need to talk." She gestured toward a small meditation room across the hall. Angela hesitated, calculating her options. She could run, but where? Sister Catherine knew her mother's location. If the nun reported her, this would be the first place authorities would look. With no real choice, Angela followed Sister Catherine into the meditation room. Afternoon sunlight streamed through stained glass windows, casting colored patterns across simple wooden chairs and a small altar. Sister Catherine closed the door behind them. "You're the reason the prison has been in an uproar," the nun said without preamble. "They discovered an inmate was missing during the final count yesterday, but they've kept it quiet. No press, minimal police involvement. They're embarrassed." Angela remained silent, her posture tense, ready to flee despite the futility. "One of our habits was missing," Sister Catherine continued. "I put it together when I realized you were gone too. I've been expecting the authorities to question us, but so far, nothing." She set her flowers on a side table. "And now, here you are, visiting your mother, just as you said you wished to do. Are you going to turn me in?" Angela asked directly. Sister Catherine studied her thoughtfully. "What exactly is your plan, Angela? You've escaped prison, visited your dying mother. What happens next?" The question caught Angela off guard. In truth, She had planned meticulously for the escape, but had thought little about what followed. Getting to her mother had been her sole focus. "I don't know," she admitted. "I couldn't bear the thought of not saying goodbye. Beyond that..." She shrugged helplessly. "You do understand that by escaping, you've likely added years to your sentence and made any future compassionate release impossible." Angela nodded, her throat tight. "I know, but they refused my request for temporary release. Said my original charges made me a flight risk." A bitter laugh escaped her. "I guess they were right." Sister Catherine sighed, taking a seat and gesturing for Angela to do the same. "When I promised to bring your mother a message, I meant it. You could have trusted me with that at least." "I'm sorry," Angela said, and was surprised to realize she meant it. But a message wouldn't have been enough. "I needed to see her, to tell her," she faltered, "to make sure she knows I'm going to be okay. Even though that may no longer be true." Angela looked away, unable to meet the nun's steady gaze. The reality of her situation was beginning to sink in fully. Her mother was dying. She was a fugitive. When Carol passed, Angela would have nothing. No home, no legitimate identification, no future except one spent in hiding or back in prison with an extended sentence. "I've made a mess of things," she finally admitted. Again. Sister Catherine was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice had softened. "Your actions were wrong, Angela. But your motivation, to be with your dying mother, that comes from love. There's grace in that, despite the method." Angela looked up, confused by the lack of condemnation. "Here's what I propose," Sister Catherine continued. "I won't report you today. You have until tomorrow evening to spend with your mother. After that, you have two choices: run and live a life in shadows, or return to Lakewood voluntarily with me as witness to your surrender." "Return voluntarily? Why would I do that?" "Because it might make a difference in how they treat your case. Because running forever is its own kind of prison. Because the path to redemption sometimes requires facing our mistakes directly." Sister Catherine leaned forward. "And because your mother raised you to do what's right, even when it's difficult, especially then." The words struck Angela like a physical blow. It was exactly what Carol would say. "I can't go back," she whispered. "Not yet, not while she's still..." "Tomorrow evening," Sister Catherine repeated firmly. "That's the time I can give you. I'll be here at 6 o'clock. You can make your decision then." She stood, picking up her flowers. "I'll visit your mother another time. These hours should be yours." At the door, she paused. "Angela, whatever you decide tomorrow, remember that your worth isn't determined by your worst mistakes, or even by your best intentions. It's in how you respond when the path forward seems impossible." After Sister Catherine left, Angela remained in the meditation room, her thoughts churning. The nun had offered her something unexpected. Not just extra time with her mother, but a choice about how her future would unfold. A choice that, for once, wasn't between bad and worse options, but between difficult paths that each contained seeds of potential redemption. Angela had never considered voluntary surrender. It seemed an admission of defeat, a nullification of everything she'd risked in her escape. Yet Sister Catherine's words had awakened something in her. A longing for a life not spent in hiding. A future where she might eventually walk in daylight without fear. And there was her mother to consider. What would bring Carol peace in her final days? Knowing her daughter was free but hunted, or knowing she had chosen a harder but ultimately more hopeful path? Angela finally rose and returned to her mother's room. Carol was awake now, her face brightening as Angela entered. I was afraid you might not come back," she said softly. "I'm here," Angela replied, taking her seat beside the bed. She didn't mention Sister Catherine or the choice that now loomed before her. Those hours belonged to them alone. Mother and daughter reconnecting across the chasm of years and mistakes and regrets, finding their way back to the love that had never truly been lost. Darkness had fallen over Columbus when Angela left St. Mary's Hospice, slipping out a side entrance to avoid the evening shift change at reception. Her mother had finally fallen asleep after hours of conversation that had ranged from reminiscences about Angela's childhood to frank discussions about Carol's illness and limited time remaining. They had carefully avoided talking about Angela's legal situation until the very end, when Carol had taken her daughter's hand with surprising strength. "Promise me you'll find a way to live in the light," she'd said, her eyes intense despite her fatigue. "Not just survive, but live with purpose. I need to know that's possible for you." Angela had promised, though she had no idea how to fulfill those words. Now, walking through residential streets with no particular destination, Angela felt the weight of multiple impossibilities pressing down on her. She had less than 24 hours to make a decision that would determine the entire course of her remaining life. Return to prison voluntarily, facing additional years of incarceration, but preserving some slim hope of eventual legitimate freedom. Or disappear completely, living off the grid, always one step ahead of discovery. Neither option fulfilled her promise to her mother. Neither allowed her to truly live in the light. Angela found herself in a small neighborhood park, empty at this late hour. She sat heavily on a bench, watching the yellow glow of street lamps reflecting off a small pond. Her funds were nearly exhausted. She had nowhere to stay tonight, no one to turn to. The reality of life as a fugitive was already making itself clear, and she'd been free less than 48 hours. "Some freedom," she muttered to herself. A sound nearby made her tense, ready to flee. A figure emerged from the darkness, a woman walking a small dog. The woman nodded politely as she passed Angela's bench, completely uninterested in the stranger sitting alone at night. Just another forgettable encounter in a city of thousands. The moment crystallized something for Angela. This was what her future held if she ran. Anonymous encounters, meaningless interactions, always keeping people at a distance for fear of discovery. She would exist, but never truly connect, never build anything lasting, never fulfill her potential in any way that mattered. Her mother deserved better than that hollow promise. Angela herself deserved better, despite everything. With sudden clarity, Angela stood. She needed a place to spend the night and think. Walking with new purpose, she headed toward the lights of a budget motel she'd passed earlier. She would use her remaining cash for a room, shower, and perhaps find the clarity that had eluded her during these chaotic days of flight. The motel clerk barely glanced at her as she paid cash for a single night, not asking for ID due to either disinterest or the establishment's relaxed policies. The room was basic but clean. A bed, a chair, a small bathroom with a shower that produced only lukewarm water. Angela showered anyway, washing away the tension of the day. As she dried herself with a thin motel towel, she caught her reflection in the steamy mirror. The face looking back at her seemed simultaneously familiar and strange. The same features she'd always had, but somehow altered by her experiences, by the weight of decisions made and still to come. She dressed in her borrowed clothes and sat on the edge of the bed, switching on the small television for company. The local news was just starting. Angela's heart seized as the anchor's words registered. Police continue to search for escaped inmate Angela Mercer, who walked out of Lakewood Correctional Facility 2 days ago disguised as a nun. Mercer, serving time for armed robbery, is not considered dangerous, but authorities warn the public not to approach her. Anyone with information is asked to contact the sheriff's department immediately. Her grainy prison intake photo appeared on screen, hair longer than, expression defiant. It barely resembled the woman she was now, but it was enough for someone looking closely. The story shifted to weather, and Angela exhaled slowly. Her escape was public now, no longer the quiet embarrassment the prison had hoped to manage internally. Sister Catherine must have known this would happen when she'd offered Angela until tomorrow evening. The nun had given her a choice, but had been realistic about the narrowing window of opportunity. Angela switched off the television and lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling. Her thoughts turned to Sister Catherine, a woman who had every reason to turn Angela in immediately, but had instead offered understanding and even a kind of partnership in whatever came next. Why? What did the nun see in Angela that warranted such grace? The question followed Angela into uneasy dreams filled with prison corridors that led to hospice rooms, habits that transformed into prison uniforms, and her mother's voice echoing with words just beyond comprehension. She woke early, disoriented and stiff from the unfamiliar bed. For a moment, she didn't remember where she was. Not her cell, not home, but somewhere in between. A transitional space reflecting her current state of limbo. As consciousness fully returned, so did the weight of the decision before her. Angela showered again, trying to clear her mind. As she dressed, her resolve began to crystallize. She would spend the day with her mother as planned, and by 6 o'clock she would have her answer for Sister Catherine. Angela left the motel as anonymous as she'd arrived, walking briskly toward St. Mary's. The morning air was crisp with early autumn, trees beginning to show hints of gold and red. The world continued its ordinary rhythms. People heading to work, children to school. Life proceeding with the mundane miracle of normalcy that Angela had been separated from for years. If she surrendered, it would be years more before she could rejoin that ordinary flow of life. But if she ran, she might never truly be part of it again, always watching from the shadows, never belonging. As St. Mary's came into view, Angela slowed her pace. This day with her mother might be their last together. Whatever decision she made by evening, everything would change again. She needed to make these hours count, not with grand gestures or emotional declarations, but with the simple, precious gift of presence. Angela took a deep breath and walked through the hospice doors, signing in as Beth once more. The receptionist greeted her with recognition this time. "Mrs. Mercer mentioned you might be back. She's having breakfast now. You can go right up." "Thank you," Angela replied, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions beneath her calm exterior. She climbed the stairs slowly, preparing herself for the day ahead. A day of connection and farewell, a day that would end with a choice that would define her future, whatever path she selected. Her mother looked up as Angela entered the room, a fragile smile spreading across her face. "You came back," Carol said softly. "I promised I would," Angela replied, settling into the chair beside the bed. She took her mother's hand. "And I'm here for as long as you want me today." What she didn't say was that by nightfall, one way or another, she would be gone again. The knowledge sat heavy between them, unspoken but understood as they began their final day together. Angela helped her mother into a wheelchair, carefully arranging a blanket over her lap despite the warmth of the day. Carol's weakness was more pronounced than the previous day, but her determination remained undiminished. "The garden," she insisted. "I want to feel the sun." Angela wheeled her mother down the hospice's wide corridors and out through French doors that opened onto a carefully maintained garden. stone paths wound between raised flower beds accessible to patients in wheelchairs. A small fountain provided gentle background music to their conversation. "This is where I come to think," Carol said, as Angela positioned her wheelchair in a patch of sunshine. "When I first arrived, I could walk these paths myself. Now, ... She gestured at the wheelchair with a wry smile. "We adapt." The simple philosophy struck Angela deeply. We adapt. Her mother had adapted to illness, to approaching death, to the limitations of her failing body, all with the grace Angela had always associated with her. Could Angela adapt too, not just to circumstances imposed upon her, but to the consequences of her own choices? "Tell me about your students," Angela said, sitting on a bench beside her mother's wheelchair. "You must miss teaching." Carol's face brightened. "I do, but several former colleagues bring their classes to visit. Last week, Mrs. Jeffries brought her first graders. They read me stories they'd written." She chuckled softly. "Most featured unicorns or dinosaurs or both, somehow coexisting." Angela smiled, imagining her mother surrounded by eager 6-year-olds. Teaching had been Carol's calling, her gift to the world. Even in illness, she remained connected to that purpose, that community she had built over decades in the classroom. "What about you?" Carol asked, turning to study her daughter's face. "What would you do, Angie, if you could do anything? If there were no limitations?" The question caught Angela off guard. She'd been so focused on survival, first in prison, then in her escape, that she'd rarely allowed herself to consider possibilities beyond immediate needs. "I don't know," she admitted. "I was good with computers in the education program. Maybe something with data or programming." "You always had a mind for patterns," Carol nodded. "You could see connections others missed, even as a child." "Fat lot of good it did me," Angela said ruefully. "Used that talent to plan an armed robbery." Carol's hand found hers, surprisingly warm despite her illness. "Talents are neutral, Angie. It's how we apply them that matters. The same ability to see patterns and plan carefully could make you exceptional in the right environment." Angela fell silent, considering her mother's words. There was truth there, painful truth that highlighted how her choices, not her abilities, had determined her path. They spent the morning in the garden, talking sometimes, sitting in comfortable silence at others. Hospice staff brought lunch on trays, and Angela helped her mother eat small bites of soup and toast. Throughout, Angela remained acutely aware of the hours ticking by, bringing her closer to her evening decision. As afternoon shadows lengthened across the garden, Carol grew visibly tired. Angela wheeled her back to her room, helping her into bed with gentle care. "You've decided something," Carol said once she was settled against her pillows. It wasn't a question. Angela looked up in surprise. "What makes you say that?" "I know that expression. You've made up your mind about something important." Carol patted the bed beside her. "Tell me." Angela sat carefully on the edge of the mattress. "I met Sister Catherine yesterday," she began. "The nun from your prison?" Carol's eyebrows rose. "Here?" Angela nodded, explaining Sister Catherine's regular visits to the hospice, their encounter and the choice the nun had offered. As she spoke, she watched her mother's face carefully for reactions. "So, I have until 6 o'clock tonight," Angela concluded. "Run and stay free, but live looking over my shoulder forever. Or surrender voluntarily and face whatever comes next." Carol was quiet for a long moment, her eyes closed. Angela thought she might have drifted to sleep, but then her mother spoke, her voice soft but clear. "When you were little, maybe 6 or 7, You broke Mrs. Henderson's window with a baseball. Do you remember?" Angela nodded, confused by the sudden change of subject. "You were terrified," Carol continued, "not just of getting in trouble, but because Mrs. Henderson was that scary old lady all the neighborhood kids avoided. Remember what I told you to do? You said I had to go to her house and tell her what I'd done," Angela said slowly. "I thought you were punishing me. But you went, walked right up to her porch and rang the doorbell. And she made me cookies while we waited for the glass repair guy," Angela finished, the memory suddenly vivid. "She wasn't scary at all, just lonely." Carol smiled. "The thing that frightens us most is rarely as terrible as we imagine, and facing it directly often creates possibilities we couldn't have anticipated." She squeezed Angela's hand. "I can't tell you what to do. This choice is yours. But I want you to know that whatever you decide, I'm proud of the woman you're becoming. The one who can see difficult truths and make hard choices. Even after everything I've done, especially after everything. Growth doesn't happen when things are easy, Angie." They talked until Carol's energy faded and she drifted into sleep, her breathing shallow but steady. Angela sat beside her, watching the rhythmic rise and fall of her chest, memorizing her mother's face. The lines of laughter around her eyes, the determined set of her jaw even in repose. Features Angela might not see again for years, if ever. At 5:30, Angela leaned forward and kissed her mother's forehead. "I love you, Mom," she whispered. "I'll find a way to live in the light. I promise." Carol didn't stir, deep in exhausted sleep. Angela stood, taking one last look at the room. The photographs, the cards from former students, the small personal touches that made this sterile medical space into her mother's final home. Then she slipped quietly into the hallway and made her way to the meditation room where she'd agreed to meet Sister Catherine. The nun wasn't there yet. Angela sat in the same chair she'd occupied the day before, watching colored light from the stained glass windows create patterns on the wooden floor. At precisely 6 o'clock, the door opened. Sister Catherine entered, her expression neutral as she took in Angela's presence. "You're here," she said simply. "I'm here," Angela agreed. She took a deep breath, steadying herself for the words that would set her future in motion. "I've made my decision." "I'll go back with you," Angela said, her voice steady despite the enormity of her decision. "Voluntarily." Sister Catherine studied her face, perhaps looking for signs of reluctance or fear. She would find them, Angela knew. She was terrified, but beneath the fear was something stronger, a clarity she hadn't felt in years. "May I ask what led you to this choice?" the nun inquired gently. Angela considered the question. "My mother said something about adaptation, about facing what frightens us." She looked down at her hands, surprised to find them steady. "I'm tired of running from consequences. I want to find out who I could be if I stopped trying to escape my own life." Sister Catherine nodded. "That's a powerful realization. It doesn't make me any less afraid of what comes next." "Courage isn't the absence of fear," Sister Catherine said, "but acting with integrity despite it." She glanced at her watch. "We should go soon. I've arranged transportation." "Can I see my mother one more time?" Angela asked. "To say goodbye?" Sister Catherine hesitated. "She's sleeping now. The nurse said she was very tired after your day together. Would waking her be a kindness or a burden?" Angela absorbed the gentle rebuke. Her desire to see her mother again was selfish, a need for reassurance rather than what was best for Carol. "You're right," she acknowledged. "Let her rest." "I'll watch over her," Sister Catherine promised, "and I'll make sure she knows of your decision. They left St. Mary's through a side entrance where a modest sedan waited, driven by an older man in clerical clothing whom Sister Catherine introduced simply as Father Michael. No police cars, no handcuffs, just a quiet departure that matched the dignity of Angela's choice. The drive back to Lakewood Correctional Facility took nearly 3 hours. They traveled mostly in silence, Angela watching familiar landscapes transform into the rural setting of the prison. Each mile brought her closer to the consequences of both her escape and her surrender. "What happens when we arrive?" Angela finally asked as the prison came into view, its perimeter lights illuminating the gathering dusk. "I've been in contact with the warden," Sister Catherine replied. "They're expecting us. I'll accompany you through processing and remain as a witness to ensure fair treatment." Angela nodded, grateful for the nun's advocacy, but under no illusions about what awaited her. Escape was a serious offense. Even with a voluntary return, she faced significant additional time. The car stopped at the main entrance rather than the visitor parking. 2 guards emerged immediately from the building, their postures alert but not aggressive. Father Michael remained in the car while Sister Catherine accompanied Angela to meet them. "Mercer," one guard acknowledged, neither hostile nor friendly. "Arms out." Angela complied with the familiar procedure, allowing herself to be handcuffed. The metal felt cold against her wrists, a physical reminder of the freedom she was relinquishing. "I'm Sister Catherine from the Sisters of Mercy." The nun introduced herself formally. "I've arranged with Warden Harris to witness Ms. Mercer's processing as she has voluntarily surrendered herself." The guards exchanged glances but didn't object. One spoke into his radio, confirming their arrival, while the other guided Angela into the building. Sister Catherine followed closely. The next hours passed in a blur of procedures. Photographs, fingerprinting, medical screening, paperwork documenting her escape and return. Angela answered questions mechanically, signing statements, acknowledging the new charges against her. Throughout, Sister Catherine remained a calm presence at the periphery of each room, her quiet dignity seemingly affecting even the prison staff, who conducted their duties with minimal commentary or judgment. Finally, Angela was issued a new prison uniform. As she changed in a small bathroom under supervision, she folded her borrowed civilian clothes carefully. "What happens to these?" she asked the female guard watching her. "They'll be held with your personal effects," the woman replied. "Or donated if you prefer." "Donated," Angela decided. "Someone else might need them more." The guard nodded without comment, but something in her expression suggested respect for the small gesture of consideration. When Angela emerged in her prison uniform, Sister Catherine approached her before she could be taken to her cell. "I'll be back to visit next week," the nun said. "We have much to discuss about your future." Angela looked at her in surprise. "My future? I just added years to my sentence. Perhaps, but time can be used in many ways." Sister Catherine's expression was determined. "There are educational programs, work opportunities, even legal channels we haven't explored. Your voluntary return counts for something." "Why are you helping me?" Angela asked, the question that had been troubling her since their first encounter at the hospice. Sister Catherine smiled slightly. "Because I see in you what your mother sees. Someone worth believing in, despite mistakes." She touched Angela's arm briefly. "Rest tonight. We'll talk more when I return." With that, Sister Catherine departed, leaving Angela to be escorted to her temporary cell in the administrative segregation unit, where she would remain until disciplinary proceedings determined her permanent status. The cell was smaller than her previous one, with only basic furnishings and no personal items. Angela sat on the narrow bed, the familiar sounds of the prison surrounding her. Doors closing, distant conversations, the institutional rhythm she had hoped to escape forever. Yet, strangely, she felt a kind of peace. Not happiness. She was under no illusions about the difficulties ahead. But the constant vigilance, the fear of discovery that had accompanied her brief freedom was gone. She had made her choice and would face what came next. As lights out approached, Angela lay on her bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking of her mother resting miles away at St. Mary's. She hoped Carol would understand her decision, would recognize it as Angela's first step toward the promise she had made, to find a way to live in the light, even if that light was temporarily dimmed by prison walls. "I'm keeping my promise, Mom," she whispered into the darkness. "It just might take a little longer than we hoped." 3 weeks after her return to Lakewood, Angela sat across from Warden Harris in his office, hands folded in her lap, expression carefully neutral. Sister Catherine occupied a chair beside her, a silent but determined presence. "The disciplinary committee has reviewed your case," Harris said, opening a file before him. "Escape is a serious offense, Mercer. Under normal circumstances, you'd be looking at an additional 3 to 5 years added to your sentence, transfer to maximum security, and loss of all privileges." Angela nodded. She had expected nothing less. "However," the warden continued, "certain factors have been taken into consideration. Your voluntary surrender, your previously clean record while incarcerated, the unusual circumstances regarding your mother's condition." He glanced briefly at Sister Catherine, "and the advocacy of the Sisters of Mercy, who have vouched for your character." He closed the file and leaned forward. 2 years will be added to your original sentence. You'll remain at medium security but lose visiting privileges for 6 months, with one exception for compassionate reasons which I'll address separately. You'll also be removed from your current work assignment in the kitchen and reassigned to maintenance. Angela absorbed the information. The additional time was less than she'd feared. The loss of privileges was expected, but the mention of a compassionate exception caught her attention. "Your mother's doctor has submitted paperwork indicating she has entered hospice care's final stages," Harris said, his tone softening slightly. "A supervised visit has been approved for next Tuesday. Sister Catherine has offered to escort you." Angela's breath caught. She hadn't expected this concession, hadn't dared hope for a chance to see her mother again before the end. "Thank you," she managed, her voice thick with emotion. Harris nodded once, then turned to administrative matters. Paperwork to sign, procedures to follow. Throughout, Sister Catherine occasionally interjected questions or clarifications, her quiet persistence ensuring Angela understood everything and was treated fairly. As the meeting concluded, the warden fixed Angela with a direct look. "Don't mistake this for leniency, Mercer. You're being given a second chance because of extraordinary circumstances and strong advocacy. Don't waste it." "I won't, sir," Angela replied with genuine sincerity. Back in her cell, she'd been moved from administrative segregation to a regular unit the previous week. Angela sat on her bed, processing what had just occurred. 2 more years. It was significant time, but not the devastating extension she had feared. And the chance to see her mother again, that was beyond any expectation. A correctional officer appeared at her door. "Mercer, you have a visitor in the program room." Confused, Angela followed the officer. Visitors weren't allowed in the program rooms. They were restricted to the official visitation area with its tables bolted to the floor and constant supervision. The program room was empty except for Sister Catherine, who sat at a table with a laptop computer open before her. "I thought you'd left," Angela said, puzzled by the nun's continued presence. "I had one more thing to arrange," Sister Catherine replied, gesturing to the chair opposite her. "Sit, please." Angela complied, still confused. "I've spoken with your mother's hospice nurse," Sister Catherine explained. "Carol is having a difficult day, too weak for phone calls, but she very much wants to speak with you." She turned the laptop to face Angela. On the screen was a video call connection, and there, propped up in her hospice bed, was Carol Mercer. "Mom?" Angela gasped, leaning toward the screen. "Angie," her mother smiled weakly. "There you are." Sister Catherine rose discreetly. "I'll give you privacy. You have 30 minutes before the system automatically disconnects. I've arranged with the warden for weekly video calls until—" She didn't finish the sentence, but her meaning was clear. "Thank you," Angela whispered, unable to take her eyes from her mother's image. When they were alone, Angela moved closer to the screen. "How are you feeling?" "Don't waste our time with that question," Carol chided gently. "I'm dying, you know that. Let's talk about you. Sister Catherine tells me you're facing your situation with courage." Angela swallowed hard. "I'm trying. It's not easy. Nothing worthwhile ever is." Carol's voice was weaker than when Angela had last seen her, but her spirit remained undiminished. "Sister Catherine also mentioned some possibilities for your future there. Educational programs?" "Yes," Angela confirmed. "I've applied for the advanced computer programming course, and there's a paralegal training program I might qualify for later." They talked for the full 30 minutes, about Angela's daily life, about Carol's care, about memories they shared. Neither mentioned the approaching end of Carol's life directly, but it colored every word, lending weight and urgency to their conversation. As the call timer reached its final minute, Carol leaned toward the camera. "I want you to know something, Angie. What you did, escaping to see me. It was wrong in many ways, but I understood it. And your decision to go back, to face consequences. That's the daughter I raised. That's the woman I always knew you could be." Tears blurred Angela's vision. "I love you, Mom. I love you too. Always have, always will." Carol's smile was tired but radiant. "Now promise me again to live in the light," Angela finished. "I promise." The screen went black as the call disconnected. Angela sat motionless, tears streaming down her face, both heartbroken and strangely comforted by the exchange. Sister Catherine returned a few minutes later, closing the laptop quietly. "Your mother is a remarkable woman," she observed. "Yes," Angela agreed, wiping her cheeks. "She is." "She mentioned you've applied for the computer program." Angela nodded. "It's competitive, only 10 spots available, and my disciplinary record might disqualify me now." "Perhaps, perhaps not." Sister Catherine's expression was thoughtful. "I have some connections with the educational coordinator. Your technical aptitude scores from your GED program were exceptional. That should count for something." Angela looked at her in surprise. "You checked my records?" "Of course. I needed to understand who I was advocating for." The nun smiled slightly. "Your mother sees your potential. So do I. But more importantly, I think you're beginning to see it yourself." Over the following weeks, a pattern emerged. Angela attended her classes, performed her maintenance work duties without complaint, and met with Sister Catherine weekly. The nun brought news of Carol, whose condition continued to deteriorate but whose spirit remained strong. The Tuesday visit to the hospice came and went. A bittersweet 6 hours spent at Carol's bedside, Angela in prison uniform with a guard posted discreetly at the door. Mother and daughter said everything that needed saying, made peace with the inevitable, and parted with the knowledge that it was likely their final physical meeting. 2 weeks later, during a routine video call, the hospice nurse informed Angela that Carol had slipped into unconsciousness. She wasn't expected to regain awareness. "Would you like me to hold the phone to her ear?" the nurse asked gently. "She might still hear you." Angela nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. When the nurse positioned the phone, Angela spoke from her heart, thanking her mother for everything she'd given, for her unwavering belief, for teaching by example how to face life's hardest moments with grace and integrity. "I'm going to be okay, Mom," she concluded. "I promise. You can rest now." Carol Mercer died peacefully that night. Sister Catherine came to Lakewood the next morning to deliver the news in person, sitting with Angela in her cell as she absorbed the finality of her loss. "What happens now?" Angela asked finally, her voice hollow. "You grieve," Sister Catherine answered simply. "And then you continue becoming the woman your mother knew you could be." How? The question contained all of Angela's doubt, her fear that without Carol's belief in her, she might lose her way again. Sister Catherine took Angela's hand, one day at a time, one choice at a time. She smiled gently. "And you won't do it alone." 2 days later, Angela received notification that she had been accepted into the advanced computer programming course. The educational coordinator's note mentioned her exceptional aptitude and demonstrated commitment to rehabilitation. Angela recognized Sister Catherine's influence, but also something more. An opportunity created not just by advocacy, but by her own choices. She had returned voluntarily, had accepted consequences, had committed to a different path forward. That evening in her cell, Angela took out the small notebook she had been permitted to keep, no longer for planning escapes, but for mapping a future. On its pages, she began to outline possibilities, skills to develop, courses to take, goals to work toward. It wasn't freedom, not yet, but it was purpose. A roadmap to becoming someone who could eventually walk in the light, just as she had promised her mother. And for the first time since her return to Lakewood, Angela felt something unexpected. Not happiness exactly, but hope. Small and fragile, but undeniably real. 5 years later, Angela stood at the doors of Lakewood Correctional Facility. A small box of personal belongings under one arm, release papers in her hand. The morning sun cast long shadows across the parking lot where Sister Catherine waited beside her modest car. The 5 years had transformed Angela in ways both visible and invisible. Her hair had grown out, now falling in soft waves to her shoulders. Her posture was straighter, her gaze clearer and more direct. But the more profound changes lay beneath the surface. In her education, her skills, and most importantly, in her sense of who she was and who she could become. The additional 2 years for her escape had extended to 3 due to the slow pace of the legal system. But Angela had used every day purposefully. The computer programming course had led to advanced certification. The paralegal training had given her understanding of a system she'd once only experienced as a defendant. She'd even begun mentoring other inmates, sharing her hard-won knowledge about how to use time constructively rather than simply endure it. Through it all, Sister Catherine had remained her most steadfast supporter, visiting weekly, arranging for educational opportunities, and eventually helping to secure what waited for Angela now, a genuine second chance. Angela approached the car, suddenly shy despite their years of connection. "Thank you for coming," she said simply. Sister Catherine smiled. "Where else would I be on this day?" She took the box of belongings, placing it in the back seat. "Are you ready?" Angela looked back at the facility that had been her home for so long. "Yes," she said firmly, "more than ready." They drove in comfortable silence for several miles before Sister Catherine spoke again. The apartment is small but clean, walking distance to the bus line. The position at the tech nonprofit starts next Monday. Data management just as you hoped. And they know about my record? Angela confirmed, still finding it difficult to believe an organization would hire her despite her past. They know everything, Sister Catherine assured her. They believe in second chances. Many of their staff have similar backgrounds. Angela nodded, gazing out the window at the ordinary miracle of freedom. People going about their lives, making choices large and small without restriction. Soon, she would rejoin that flow of humanity, not as an observer, but as a participant. I'm nervous, she admitted. What if I can't adjust? What if I make mistakes again? You will make mistakes, Sister Catherine said matter-of-factly. Everyone does. The question is what kind of mistakes and how you respond to them. They drove through Columbus, eventually turning into a modest neighborhood of small apartment buildings and family homes. Sister Catherine parked in front of a well-maintained 3-story building. Home, she announced, at least for now. The apartment was indeed small. 1 bedroom, a compact kitchen, a living area with a second-hand couch and desk. But to Angela, it represented luxury beyond imagination. Windows without bars, a door she could close or open at will. Privacy. Choice. "The I have something for you," Sister Catherine said, reaching into her bag. She withdrew a framed photograph of Carol Mercer, not the thin, ill woman of Angela's last memories, but Carol in her prime, standing before her classroom, smiling with the confidence of someone living her purpose. "I found this in her effects after she passed. I thought you should have it." Angela took the photograph with trembling hands. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything. I wouldn't be here without you." Sister Catherine shook her head. "You're here because of your choices, Angela. I merely witnessed them." They spent the afternoon settling Angela into her new home. Sister Catherine had arranged basic necessities: dishes, linens, toiletries, and a small group of former inmates now successfully reintegrated into society had contributed items from their own homes to welcome another returning citizen. As evening approached, Sister Catherine prepared to leave. "You have my number," she reminded Angela. "Day or night if you need anything." "I'll be fine," Angela assured her, though uncertainty lingered beneath her confidence. "I know you will." Sister Catherine's certainty was absolute. "Remember what your mother said? One day at a time," Angela finished. "One choice at a time." After Sister Catherine departed, Angela stood in the center of her apartment, absorbing the silence, the solitude, the freedom. She placed her mother's photograph on the small desk where she would soon begin working remotely for the nonprofit 3 days a week. Outside her window, the setting sun cast golden light across the neighboring buildings. Angela opened the window, feeling the evening breeze on her face, hearing the sounds of the city. Traffic, distant conversations, life happening in all its complexity. She thought of her promise to her mother, to find a way to live in the light. The path to fulfilling that promise had been neither straight nor easy. It had required facing consequences, accepting help, doing the difficult internal work of change. It would require vigilance and integrity every day going forward. But standing there in her own space, with the future unfolding before her, Angela knew with certainty that she had kept her word. The light she had promised her mother wasn't just the physical freedom of this moment. It was the clarity of purpose, the authentic connections, and the hard-won self-knowledge she now carried within her. In the morning, she would begin her first full day of freedom, applying for identification, opening a bank account, learning the neighborhood, Small, ordinary steps that represented extraordinary change. Her past would always be part of her, but it no longer defined her future. Angela placed her hand on her mother's photograph. "I made it, Mom," she whispered. "Not to the end of the journey, just to a new beginning. But I'm in the light now, and I'm going to stay here." Outside, the last rays of sunset gave way to twilight. Angela didn't turn on a lamp, preferring to stand in the gathering darkness and watch as, one by one, lights appeared in neighboring windows, each representing lives, stories, possibilities. Tomorrow, her own light would join them. Not as an escaped prisoner hiding in shadows, not as an inmate restricted by walls, but as a woman who had faced her darkest moments and emerged stronger, wiser, and finally free to write her own story. Angela Mercer smiled into the darkness, ready for whatever came next. The end.